Hello and welcome back to the Fantasy Football Forecast. I'm here with my co-host Matt Giraldi,
What's going on?
and I am Trevor Scott. So we're going to get into a little bit more fantasy-based this week. We talked about the Super Bowl last episode, and this week we're going to get into some hot finishers. Look at the top 20 in ADP. Get into a couple sleepers, breakouts, and busts, and we'll wrap this episode at that point. So starting it off, let's get into it. We talked about this guy or hot finishers. We talked about this guy to start last week or to end last week. So fitting to start this week with him, Brees Hall. I'm not sure that you could have had a hotter finish than his. So where does that vault him to you at this point?
He's locked in at my number two running back right now. I just think his upside, his talent, he came back to full health and we saw him just explode at the end. And, I made this argument last week that I think with Rodgers back, the offense will obviously be much more efficient overall. Maybe the touches go down a little bit, just, with the fact that they actually have a real quarterback under center. But I think the touchdowns will go up. And, like I said to you, who else is going to be backing him up? So I'm fully on board with taking him as early as late first round, maybe the seventh pick. We'd have to kind of dig through that, but if I
Yeah, I
miss
mean,
out
if
on the
you have him at the
CMC,
second running back, that means you've got a lot of receivers in front of him. So yeah,
yeah, and this is
that's
a
going to be
three
an
wide
interesting
receiver league,
conversation.
so yeah, so we can dig into that more at a later date. But how do you feel about I guess him, and then going to the next guy, Nico Collins?
Yeah, so for Brees, I said it last week. I'm not super comfortable with him. I'm probably going to go in a different direction. I think for most of the season, he just wasn't that good on the ground. And maybe that's still recovering from the ACL. And he was good enough to be a starter, but for the most part, he was pretty disappointing. So I think I'm not sure that I wouldn't put him around 10, near Saquon Barkley and maybe ahead of Achan and Walker, but that's kind of more what I'm looking at. I think I'd take Bijan ahead of him, Jonathan Taylor, Jameer Gibbs, Kyron, even Etienne. I don't know. I just feel like those guys were much more consistent throughout the entire season, despite Brees Hall's hot finish. So I understand why people are putting him up. I get that the offense is going to be better and all that stuff, but in terms of overall consistency throughout the season, that's why I feel the way I do about Brees. Getting into Nico Collins, he finished really hot, and I think um, when people are evaluating the situation, they might forget that Tank Dell was out for the rest of the season, right? And
Yeah,
Tank had kind of taken over from Nico, kind of not rendering him unusable or anything, but rendering him more of a deep threat. So when he did catch a long touchdown or he did have one of those 40, 50-yard plays, then Nico would have an awesome game. But, he did have a couple disappointing games before Tank got hurt. And then as soon as Tank got hurt, it was just like target monster for Nico and was awesome. And he was a top 10 receiver the rest of the year. And even in the playoffs, he carried it into the two games where he was an absolute beast there as
yeah,
well. So, I mean, it is going to be an interesting dynamic to see how, since he was so good after Tank left, to see if he can keep that rolling and stay in that number one role and have Tank kind of be a very, very good complementary piece to him. So I'm in on Nico Collins. I think he's going to be a top 10 guy. I don't think that he's being ranked that way in very many circles either, right? He's hovering around 15, kind of around the two 49ers guys, Mike Evans, Devontae
yeah.
Adams, kind of in that area. But I think I'm going to be comfortable moving him up, and I do think I'd be comfortable picking him in the third round. And keep in mind this is a two quarterback league, so there will be quarterbacks going two quarterback 10 team league, right? So I could see him going around 25 overall.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic just based on ADP. I mean, if you look at like some of the early best ball stuff, he's going right behind, I want to say AJ Brown and Garrett Wilson, and I'm just not comfortable at that price point. I mean, granted, you will get spike weeks just with the deep threat. I get that, but yeah, like you said, he was electric at the end and in the playoffs with Tank out, and we were forgetting that not forgetting that, I mean, how many targets was Tank getting, at his peak, 11,
A
12,
lot.
something,
Like,
something
well, he's probably
crazy.
averaging 8.5 or something like that. But yeah, a lot though. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that the depth, they have a lot of depth, but those are kind of wide receiver 4 or 5 type guys, the John Mechie's of the world. And I just think, all those sort of went to Nico. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but I do want a piece if it's, for the right price.
Yeah.
Moving
The
over
other
to Go
the
ahead.
other
Sorry.
thing, just real quick to wrap up the conversation on Nico, the other thing to consider when thinking about Tank Dell versus Nico, when you looked at their roles when they were on the field together, when
Mhm.
Stroud got in trouble or when Stroud needed a play or when they were in the 2 minute drill, all of those types of plays were going to Tank, and so I think that when I was initially looking at it was what I was thinking um, was going to be more
Mhm.
Nico, but it wasn't. And so that's maybe why people would lean towards Tank as well. So I'll let you transition
That's
now
a
into the next player.
Yeah, and a guy who I know that I want to say you drafted last year and hung on to until you could finally use him, Kyler Murray. Your thoughts going into next year, how you rank him, what you think?
Yeah, so Kyler's a tricky one because I drafted him in super flex in like the 12th round. Sorry, drafted him in like the 12th round. Kind of hung on to him all year in my IR spot. I was fortunate enough to dodge the Armageddon of injuries this past year, for the most part. And so I think this year though, like he did finish really hot. He had a good game against San Francisco. He, which is a good defense too.
Mhm.
Showed off his legs a little bit. I was concerned he wasn't going to run at all, but then he did quite a bit of running, moved around. I think they held him out maybe a little bit longer than they needed to make sure his legs were all the way there. So I think I could see him going around quarterback 10, 10 to 12, something like that, because you've got um, in that range, you got Justin Fields. His situation's a little bit uncertain, especially if he
Mhm.
moves on from Chicago, and then Herbert coming off the injury. I think Herbert's going to be above him, but there's a lot of people that are starting to question Herbert a little bit now as well. And then Purdy, who had an excellent season, but I don't think I
Yeah.
need to highlight the doubt that surrounds him. So he's got awesome playmakers, but if and when anything happens to any of them, I do think that Kyler can be above him too. So I do like him, and I would be comfortable with him if you decide to wait on quarterback until the fourth, maybe even the fifth round. He's somebody that I would be looking to target as my quarterback one.
Yeah, I'm all in on Kyler this year. I just think looking at Fantasy Pros, I think they've got him at 13, and McBride is a stud. I think Wilson's going to take a step forward, and I really think they're going to draft either Marvin Harrison Jr. or Malik Neighbors, and Kyler's going to be fully healthy, hopefully, and so that just elevates his floor with the run game too. And I think at that price point, like I want as much of him as I can.
Agreed. Yeah, so I think he's going to be in a good position to succeed, especially if they draft Marvin Harrison. That's going to be a much different conversation even than we're having now, because I expect if
Yeah,
that happens, his ADP is
yeah,
going to explode up.
yeah.
So then transitioning over to one of my favorite players and somebody that's getting written off, who just had an awesome playoff run, but just that constantly battled injuries this past year, was Aaron Jones. He's going on Fantasy Pros at 22 amongst running backs currently. So that would put him, in the fifth or sixth round. And that's, I know he's got injury history. I know he's getting older, but the explosiveness that he has, as long as he stays healthy, when he really gets rolling, and the offense with Jordan Love got better over the entire
Mhm.
season. He got more involved in the passing game. I really think that Aaron Jones has an easy path to being a top 15 running back.
I agree. I think where people are fading him just because they feel like they're supposed to, or age, or but you just look at how he looked at the end in the playoffs, and he just looked really unstoppable. And I think
He
that
still has
offense
it.
is, yeah. And I think that and AJ Dillon, I assume he'll get cut or hopefully never see the field again. And
Well, even
it's
if
just,
Dylan does, I mean, I kind of like having
yeah,
when you're Aaron Jones and you're a little bit lighter and faster
yeah,
and
sure,
not as
yeah,
big, right? It helps to have a guy that can take some of the or all most of the in between the tackles and some of the goal line work. It just helps you stay fresh and healthy. And at this point, I think that might help Aaron Jones. And so I just look at who they have it, who's getting ranked around 10 to 15, and it's Kenneth Walker, it's
Mm-hmm.
Rashad White, it's Isaiah Pacheco, it's James Cook. I mean, those guys all have their own upside in their own right, but like, am I really that convinced that they're going to be that much better than Aaron Jones? I'm not sure. I might feel like around that ADP, I can go wide receiver and then grab Aaron Jones to fill out my running back core.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then just moving over to his quarterback, what do you think about Jordan Love?
Yeah, Jordan Love is awesome, man. He couldn't have finished any better. He had
Yeah.
that crazy touchdown to interception ratio. I think in his last 8 games it was like 21-1. And he, in a super flex league now, I mean, he's firmly on the map of a early to mid round pick. I think he's going to be polarizing because it was his first year. There's going to be some stuff to nitpick from early in the year, and just how much is it repeatable? You see a rookie burst onto the scene, and then the first thing you think about the following year is it going to be repeatable? So I think he's going to eat that. People are either going to be all in or all out on him, especially when he's going as a QB1, borderline QB1, QB2.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I want to like him, but I just don't know that I'm ready yet to pick him over, for example, like Tua or Trevor Lawrence or Jared Goff, and all those guys are going behind him. And when you're going to have to pick him instead of Kyler Murray or even instead of Brock Purdy, I'm not sure I'm there yet. So I think the hot start or the hot finish was very good. He was really good. I think he finished as quarterback 7, but I'm not yet sure that I'm ready to pick him in that range yet.
Okay. Yeah, I would definitely lean on the side of favoring him. I would happily take him over to Goff. I see where you're going with, but Purdy I'd still probably have a little bit higher. But I guess on the other side, it's I kind of want to stay away from the wide receivers on Green Bay because we just don't really know who's going to step up, or there's just so many mouths to feed on that offense. I mean, they've got 2 good second year, will be second year tight ends. Like there's so many guys to throw the ball to. But in that same sense, I mean, he just looked really good, and there's a high upside, and yeah, I mean, I wouldn't reach on him too much, but I'm definitely on the side of favoring him. And the last guy that I know we wanted to talk about, I'm not even going to give my opinion on Ezekiel Elliott. I'm fading him. I'm not going to draft him, but whatever. Maybe I'm a cynic. What has you kind of adding him to our list?
So I wanted to add him because I feel like he's going to get lost, right? Like,
Yeah.
when you're looking at new exciting players in the offseason, right? You're looking at rookies, you're looking at guys that are coming into new roles that could be exciting, like Tony Pollard, for example, last year, right? And Ezekiel Elliott really did prove that when he's able to get the full workload, that he can be a fantasy asset. So wherever he signs, it is going to be interesting to see if it's going to be a position where there isn't a set solid starter and he has a chance to take on a lot of work, especially in the passing game. I mean, his rushing averages were below, down in the 2s and 3s per game or per rush.
Yeah.
But when you're getting a bunch of targets, when you're getting 6, 7, 8 targets and you score 4 or 5 times over that period, I think there is fantasy value to be had here, and he's going to go outside of the draftable pool, wherever he ends up getting ranked. So I just wanted to bring him up because he was very relevant. He helped one of the guys in our league end up being very good, right? That the replaced an RB2 and helped him get into the playoffs. So I just wanted to bring him up here.
Yeah, that's fair. No one's really going to be drafting him, but if you want to take a last round best ball flyer on him and just hope he kind of comes in and does that same, week 15, somebody gets hurt and steps into that role, and I hate league winner, but something like that. So I see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
Cool. And then so what we are going to do next is just go down the list of Fantasy Pros top 20 rankings, half PPR, which is what we play. Just sort of give our thoughts on that. Kind of keep it open for them, and then from there we'll jump into sleepers, breakouts, and busts. So let me share the screen. Oh, you know what? My Zoom isn't set up correctly, so we'll just table that for next week and then just do the breakouts and busts if you don't mind.
All right, sounds good to me. Let's get into them.
Cool. So I put together for my sleepers, first and foremost at the running back position, Chase Brown, Cincinnati. I just cannot get behind Joe Mixon at all. I just think he's one of those guys that he just doesn't pass the eye test. He doesn't look good running the football. He looks slow. He just, whatever his stats are stats. I know one of the guys in our league swore by him and Tony Pollard this year, and we were giving him crap all the time. But
Always.
Chase Brown right now at running back 40 on Fantasy Pros. I don't even think this is to me like an injury necessary type guy. I think he'll maybe slowly take over. I don't think he's going to be a true 3 down back just because of his size, but if you get that offense moving with Burrow back and the weapons that they have, I just think it's going to be difficult to keep him off the field. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I like that as a call. I owned him in my dynasty league, and I think depending on what happens with Mixon, right, and he's going to be a year older, a step slower, and Brown looked very explosive, was involved in the passing game, which is something that's always encouraging to see
Mm-hmm.
early in a player's career. So I think that he definitely has a chance to take the next step in terms of usability, and he's a late guy, so you probably are drafting him at the end of the draft if you're just taking a flyer on him.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Um,
true.
Somebody that I think is a sleeper that we should have predicted coming into last year, but going into this next year, I think we should maybe shed the injury risk and concern is Javonte Williams. We saw with J.K. Dobbins the year before that everybody was hyping him up that he was looking good, and then he just struggled to get healthy, looked
Mm-hmm.
solid at the end of the year. Right, same thing happened with Javonte. They had very similar knee injuries with multiple tears, multiple ligament tears, and so I think coming into this year where he's still now ranked at 27, and I understand because he wasn't that good. I think he only scored one rushing touchdown, but I just think now with Sean Payton's second year in the system, they're going to be moving on from Russell Wilson, and that Javonte could be a featured part of this offense. He's a very good pass catcher,
Mm-hmm.
also, which increases his ceiling. So if he comes out looking like the Javonte of 2022 before he got hurt, I just think that there's a chance, anyways, that he vaults himself into an every week starter, and he's not currently being drafted that way.
Yeah, I like where your head's at with that. I think, as someone who drafted him last year going zero RB, I kind of felt the pain of having to be patient and go in other directions. But I like where your head's at there. Um, yeah, I guess we'll just kind of stick to the sleepers for this episode and go back and forth. So one guy I have at the wide receiver position is I don't feel super confident about this, but I do want to put JSN up there. His draft profile, his college resume. Lockett's a year older. They've got a new OC. I don't know if you saw the video when they asked JSN to describe his old OC, and it was like the most awkward thing I've ever seen. He showed flashes. He made that great touchdown catch to win the game in the I forget who was the quarterback for that game, backing up Drew Lock, I want to say.
Yeah, it was
Um,
Lock.
so I do think they'll make an effort to get him more involved. I think one thing too going into the beginning of the year last year is he did have like a broken finger or hand or something that sort of set him back, and then really never got going. But I think just his talent, I think Gino's still got it. So that's a guy that I'm going to be looking for at the 37 for the wide receiver position right now. I'd like to at least take a shot on that.
Yeah, I like that one a lot. I was not as in on JSN coming into last year, but this year I'm going to be much more in on him. I think I agree this year now that Lockett's role is going to decline, especially as JSN ascends, and he had some excellent plays. I was also worried that he wasn't going to make any plays down the field, and I was wrong about that. He looks good down the field.
Yeah.
He made a couple nice touchdown plays down the field on top of sideline plays. He plays in the so I really think that he could be a really good option, especially where you can get him this year. A quick hitter, wide receiver that stood out to me on the rankings that I audibly laughed when I looked at it was Michael Pittman at 22. Like if that's going to be where he goes, like that, he's going to be on every single one of my teams. That's
Yeah.
like an awesome deal, big time sleeper. I just can't fathom that. I mean, somebody who's ranked in the top 10 week after week after week after week all year last year, and then can get him at 22 just for him to be ranked 17 in week 1, be ranked 12 in week 2, and then be ranked 9 moving forward. I think that's a crazy value, and I expect that to move up in the see him move up in the rankings.
Yeah, that's nuts. All right, quickly give me a tight end, quarterback. I'll give you mine, and then we can wrap things up.
Okay, awesome. I will go with Dalton Kincaid. He's currently ranked at 11 on Fantasy Pros, which is roughly where he went last year. And he proved that with Knox that he could be the guy, and they wanted to get him the ball early and often. And I really think that another year in the system, it takes tight ends a little bit of time usually. And he showed out really, really well in his rookie year. So at 11, I think, you're looking at Brock Bowers in front of him, Goddard, Ferguson, Ingram. Like I wouldn't necessarily mind taking Kincaid over those guys for additional upside and then coming back to tight end later if you felt like you needed another option.
Yeah, I like that one.
Yeah. Cool. And so what about you for your tight end?
I'm going to go Darren Waller just based on him being number 15. I think, the athleticism, the upside is there. And then I'll kind of pair that with my sleeper is Daniel Jones. I hated this pick, but when I saw him at 24,
Daniel Jones, dude.
I just at 24 in a 2 QB league, I think as a third quarterback, he's someone that I want to at least take a shot on. I mean, there's no Saquon. He's got the rushing upside, but going back to Darren Waller, I think, he can't stay healthy, but if you can get a couple good weeks out of him and trade him to one of your league mates, then that's something that I did last year, and I'll try to do again probably.
And you got picks for him.
Yeah, I hate the Daniel Jones pick, but he's 24, and I really wanted to go with a big sleeper for that one. What about you to wrap it up for QB?
And for me at QB, I like, you got to assume he resigns in Tampa Bay. So that's something that we have to wait on. But I really like Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, I thought about going him too.
Yeah, he's showing up at 23, and I really think that with the same weapons too. If Evans leaves, then it's also, so this one's kind of weird because it's up in there are a bunch of things up in the air. But I think assuming that he goes back to Tampa Bay and Evans is back in Tampa Bay, that he's going to have to go earlier than he is, right? I mean, he's going to go ahead of Caleb Williams. He's going to go ahead of Kirk Cousins, who's coming off an Achilles. He's going to go ahead of Matt Stafford, who just doesn't have that much upside, I think. So, he'll work his way into a mid-tier QB2. And I think rightfully so, he belongs there.
Cool. No, I like that a lot.
All right. Awesome. Well, that's episode number 2, and we look forward to talking to you guys again very soon. We'll cover breakouts and busts and the top 20 in ADP in the next episode.
Cool. Thanks, guys.